Whoops, sorry about that delay, folks. There, very important package delivered. So, back for part 2 now. And remember, we were just talking about this section right over here where there's a mismatch. Remember, if we're doing exercise, we need to supply enough oxygen for that exercise to take place because our muscle contractions require ATP. That happens at the electron transport chain. We need that oxygen to accept those electrons. Okay, well, we have a mismatch here. We have a demand for energy, okay, at 5 kcals per minute, but we're not consuming enough oxygen to meet that demand. Well, when you get on the treadmill, you don't get immediately spit off the back end because you're not breathing enough to supply that energy. So where does that energy come from? And specifically, where does this ATP come from? And the answer is anaerobic metabolism. Remember, we also have the ability to create ATP anaerobically. In the first couple minutes of exercise, you're going to rely on that anaerobic metabolism to meet your demand, especially if you're exercising at a kind of a moderate intensity. If you're just going for a walk, you wouldn't see quite as much of a change because the amount of energy demand is pretty close to where you are. But you're going to have some anaerobic metabolism that's going to contribute. Now, let's go, I'll shade this in here, and let's do kind of a purpley right there. So, our anaerobic metabolism has played a role here to help fill a gap. We didn't have enough oxygen supply to make enough ATP to run at 7 miles an hour, but anaerobic metabolism said, hey man, I can loan you a couple bucks, here we go, I'll give you a little ATP, okay, just pay me back later. And that's what happens exactly in this area right here. Once we stop running, once you finish that 5K, that ATP demand goes right back to where it was beforehand. All right, there we go. Nice. However, your breathing is going to remain high. So you're supplying more oxygen than your body needs at that point. But you have incurred oxygen debt. Basically, your anaerobic metabolism is the bookie on the front end saying, "Oh man, you're good for it, right? You're good for this oxygen, and you're good for this ATP." And you're like, "Totally, I can totally pay you back after the race is over. Just give me 5 minutes to finish my workout here." And then you finish your workout, and you're like, "Okay, don't need to breathe anymore. I'm not doing that exercise." And your anaerobic metabolism says, "Excuse me. Remember me? Remember I loaned you all that ATP in the beginning? Now it's time to replenish those stores." And guess what you need to do to replenish those stores? Breathe. So there we go. So this area right here is called our EPOC. And that stands for excess post exercise oxygen consumption. So our EPOC and our oxygen debt are going to be equal. And that's why you are able to start running at a pretty fast pace immediately, even though your breathing isn't quite there yet. And it's also why after you finish doing a workout, you're going to be breathing heavy for a little bit because you have to pay back that oxygen debt. Okay. The last thing I want to cover for today, oxygen supply and ventilation during graded exercise. So this is you stepping on the treadmill, and you start out at pretty slow pace, 0 grade, and you're increasing the grade, you're increasing the speed. Here we go. Okay, so let's define some of these points. We're good here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. That's pretty good. Once again, we're going to have oxygen consumption over here on our y-axis, and we don't need any real units here. We're just going to say this is increasing as we go up. That oxygen consumption is going up. We don't really need units here. Then we're going to have kind of almost 2 x-axis. First one, the main x-axis is just time. All right, so this is time 0. This is time 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, and at the end we got 12. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to put in our grade. This is the treadmill grade on a percentage. So we have 0% here. And then after 2 minutes, our treadmill grade is going to go up to 3%, 6%, 9%, 12%. And this is one of those fancy ones that can go up to 15% grade. So we are walking up a steep hill at the end of that. All right? Now, as we start, so we are starting at the very, very beginning. Here we are. Let's make this a little bit thicker, and let's go. We'll do green, just to mix it up. Here's where we start. And how does that oxygen consumption change from going at rest, where you're at 0 miles an hour, you are once again, you're straddling the treadmill and you're stepping on, you're walking at 3.5 miles per hour, and all that's going to change in these different stages is your grade's going to go up. Okay, well, we're going to get exactly what we just saw in the 2 previous figures. From minute 0 to minute 2, when that treadmill grade stays the same, you're going to have kind of a fast increase, a slower increase, and then guess what? Towards the end of that 2 minutes, you're going to reach steady state. You're not getting that much harder, okay? And then we're going to do the same thing at the end. So in minute 2 to 4, we're going to be walking once again at 3% grade. Not too challenging. You're doing all right. But guess what's going to happen? Is 3% harder than 0%? Does it require more energy? Yes. Are you going to consume more oxygen because you're requiring more energy? Yes. But you'll get exactly the same type of curve that you just saw. Look at that. Okay. And the thing I want to point out here is that at the end of these stages, you're going to get some plateau. If we zoomed in once again, we could say, hey, this little box right here, that's your oxygen debt. Get a little oxygen debt there. So your anaerobic metabolism is going to kick in a little bit every time you change your exercise intensity. All right? And now we're going from 3% to 6%. And what's going to happen here is, okay, I can still handle 6%. I'm not kind of maxed out yet. But it might be all the way until the end of the stage where I kind of get that. Let's try it one more time here. We get this fine-tuning, this like lasting. Okay, you get like a teeny little bit of plateau towards the end of that one. You can see that it's taking us longer and longer to get there, so we're getting closer to our max overall. Then at 9, between 9% or between minutes 6 and 8, when we're at 9% grade, we get a slower rise overall, and there's no plateau that occurs. And then what's going to happen is, we're going to do that thing in the next stage, minute 8 to 10 here. And it's, if you ever, kind of run a VO2 max test, you're going to have that person there. They're on there, they're huffing, they're puffing, they're trying their best to keep up. And you go, can you do one more stage? And the person's like, I don't know. And then you're like, can you try? And they're like, okay, yeah, I can do this. I'm walking up a hill at 12% grade. I can try for a little bit. And what you see is no change, and then eventually a slight decline in your exercise or your oxygen consumption overall. So we never made it to the 15% stage here, but we started to see that. What's happening is you reach your VO2 max, and you can determine a person has reached their VO2 max when O2 consumption does not change with an increase in exercise intensity. What just happened above? our exercise intensity went from walking at 9% grade to walking at 12% grade. Did exercise intensity increase? Yes. If exercise intensity increases, do we need a faster rate of ATP production? Yes. If we're going to need more ATP, guess what we need to make that ATP? Oxygen. Okay? However, our oxygen consumption between those stages didn't change. Well, why not? And the answer is that we've reached our maximum volume of oxygen that we can consume. Our mitochondria are going at full steam. They cannot use any more oxygens to accept those electrons. We're making all the ATP as fast as we possibly can at the end of this exercise. And therefore, even though you're able to maintain that exercise for a little bit longer using some of your anaerobic reserves, you're not going to be able to keep going at that pace for very long. Okay, so that's what our oxygen supply looks like during a graded exercise test. And we see right here that that is our VO2 max. So whatever value was given right there, that's going to be our maximum amount of oxygen consumption. Okay, let's leave it there for today. Like I said, I'm going to post the review sheet a little bit later. Once again, keep those questions coming. Any questions you had on today's lecture, send them to me. Let's say up until 10 a.m. on Monday, that will get counted as a bonus for this lecture right here. So up to 10 a.m. on Monday gives you a nice big window to watch all these lectures and keep up. If you have other questions, if you need a little bit more time on any of the assignments, make sure you keep a track of that. The last thing is I'm going to post quiz number 3 as well today too. And that's going to be due just before the exam is posted. So basically, you'll have the ability to complete that quiz up until the exam is up. All right, so keep track of that, and I'll see you guys on Monday.